Nobody expected Stuttgart to feel like this. Not like this. The Porsche Arena has hosted some of the biggest names in women's tennis, players who've won Grand Slams, players who've broken records, players who've made the sport stop and stare. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared anyone inside that building for what walked through the doors when Alex arrived. The cameras were already rolling, the crews already set up, the journalists already positioned, and still, when it happened, when the moment actually hit, even the people who do this for a living didn't know what to do with it. Because what unfolded over those few days in Stuttgart wasn't just a tennis story. It wasn't just another chapter in the career of a talented young player finding her footing on tour. It was something louder than that. Something that moved through the streets outside the arena and refused to stay contained. Something that you couldn't script, couldn't manufacture, couldn't fake, and the more you watch the clips, the more you realize that what happened in Stuttgart was the moment the world finally caught up to what a lot of people already knew was coming. Alex had already done things on tour that made people pay attention. The win over Leylah Fernandez had sent shockwaves through the draw. The image of her handing her shirt to Filipino fans had gone viral in the most genuine, unforced way possible. But Stuttgart was different. Stuttgart was the moment the story stopped being about potential and started being about presence, raw, undeniable electricity in their air presence. And it started before she even hit a single ball. The practice session was supposed to be routine. That's the thing about practice sessions at these tournaments, they are background noise. Players warm up, coaches watch, a few fans linger near the barriers, and life moves on. Except that's not what happened here. From the moment it got out that Alex was heading to the practice court, something shifted in the city. And if that sounds dramatic, just watch the footage because traffic actually stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Cars pulled over on the streets near the Porsche Arena, drivers stepped out, phones already raised, following the sound they could hear from blocks away. A roar. Not crowd noise in the traditional sense. Something more unified than that, more intentional, more alive. Thousands of Filipino fans had been gathering for hours, long before any scheduled session, flags already in the air, voices already locked into rhythm, chanting a name that echoed off every surface it touched. The barriers were packed shoulder to shoulder. People pressed forward, not aggressively but inevitably, the way a tide moves, because the pull was just that strong. Security teams who had been preparing for days, who had genuinely anticipated a large crowd, found themselves recalibrating because this exceeded every projection. This was overflow. This was real scale, the kind that makes your chest tighten a little when you see it, because you understand in that moment that something much bigger than a practice session is taking place. And then it happened. No countdown. One voice became 10. 10 became 100. 100 became thousands. A perfectly synchronized chant erupted from every corner of that space, organic and raw and completely unstoppable. The acoustics of the arena grabbed it and amplified it into something that didn't just fill the room but shook it, rattled it, turned it into an instrument playing one single note at a volume nobody had planned for. Players on the main court paused mid-warm-up. Umpires glanced up. Coaches looked at each other with that expression people make when they are witnessing something they'll be talking about for years. The practice court had become the main event, and every single person inside that building knew it. But here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn, because tucked quietly in the stands, almost hidden beneath the chaos, sat someone who had no business being there in that low-key way. Cap pulled down. Body language deliberately understated. The kind of presence that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. The kind that changes the entire energy of a space just by existing in it. The cameras caught the exact moment Alex noticed. She was mid-rally, moving well, fully in the zone, and then something made her look up toward the stands. She froze. Not dramatically, just for a split second, but enough. Her hitting partner hesitated, confused, waiting for the reset that didn't come. Because Alex wasn't resetting. She was already moving, crossing the court in the direction of the figure sitting quietly in the stands, because some moments are bigger than training schedules and some people you don't make wait. What happened next got filmed from every angle, every phone, every corner of that space. The embrace. The cap coming off. The ripple of recognition moving through the crowd in real time as thousands of people simultaneously tried to process who they were looking at. Alex stood face to face with this person, completely present, no distractions, just locked in. They spoke quietly for several minutes. She nodded repeatedly, absorbing every word with the kind of focus you only give to something that genuinely matters to you. The internet has been trying to decode that conversation ever since. The identity of the visitor still debated, still unconfirmed, still driving millions of views because people understand instinctively that whatever was said in that exchange left a mark. But even that wasn't the moment that cut deepest. Because somewhere in that same crowd, pressed against the barrier among thousands of fans who had made extraordinary journeys just to be in that building, one story stood quietly above the rest. The cameras found her almost by accident. A young woman, maybe 25, holding a handmade sign. 3 trains. 1 dream. 48 hours. Her eyes were red but not from exhaustion. Her hands trembled but her smile didn't waver, unfiltered and completely real in the way that only genuine emotion can be. The footage captures the exact moment Alex noticed her. She was in the middle of a rally again, and she stopped again, because this wasn't just another face in the crowd and she could feel that. She walked straight to the edge of the court, had a brief word with security, and then did something that almost never happens at this level of the sport. She asked them to let the fan through. The crowd leaned in. Phones went higher. Nobody breathed. Alex reached out and took the woman's shaking hands into her own and asked quietly, almost gently, whether she had really waited 48 hours. The woman couldn't find the words. She just nodded as tears started falling, free and unashamed. And in that moment, the noise of thousands of people somehow disappeared completely, like the whole building decided to go quiet out of respect for what was happening in that small space between 2 people. Alex said thank you. Not the performative kind. The real kind. Thank you for believing in me. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out one of her signature jerseys, the same design that had sold out almost instantly at the Miami Open, and placed it into the woman's hands before pulling her into a full embrace. The crowd didn't applaud. They erupted. There's a difference and you could hear it. Within hours the clip was on every platform, shared across continents, replayed millions of times. And then the story behind the moment surfaced and somehow made it hit even harder. Her name was Maria. She had traveled from a small town in Italy. 3 trains, 2 buses, months of careful saving just to afford the journey. When she finally arrived in Stuttgart, she didn't rest, didn't sightsee, didn't do any of the things you'd normally do in a city you've never visited. She camped outside the arena for 2 nights to secure her spot at the front barrier. All of it for one moment. One chance at connection. When she spoke to a local reporter afterward, she said she wanted Alex to know that watching her play had been the only thing that made her genuinely happy after losing her father the year before. That's what that moment was. Not fandom. Not viral content. Something far more human than either of those things. When Alex was asked about it later, you could see it sitting with her, living behind her eyes in the way that certain things do when they actually reach you. She said stories like that remind her why she plays. Not the rankings, not the titles, the people. The difference you can make just by showing up fully and playing like it means something. And then the story took another turn entirely, because if you thought the emotional weight of those moments was the whole picture, you hadn't seen the practice court footage with Iga Swiatek. When the clip surfaced of the 2 of them hitting together, not casually, not briefly, but with real intent and real intensity, tennis Twitter lost its mind completely and honestly, understandably. Because on the other side of the net from a 20-year-old still finding herself on clay stood one of the most dominant players this era has produced. A 2-time Stuttgart champion. A 4-time French Open winner. Someone who reads red clay like it's a language she was born speaking. And Alex showed no hesitation. None. No nerves visible in the footage, no adjustment period, just focus and execution from the very first exchange. 2 left-handers. 2 players shaped by elite high-performance environments. Trading ground strokes on indoor clay with a kind of fluency that made people re-watch the clips multiple times just to confirm what they were seeing. Iga delivering the kind of relentless, high-quality ball that only someone with her resume can produce. Alex at 20 absorbing every spin, every adjustment, every ounce of pace, and not just surviving it but doing something with it. Her footwork looked different. Sharper. More efficient. Her movement controlled rather than reactive, sliding into shots rather than chasing them, constructing points rather than just defending them. The left-handed angles that had always been her weapon were cutting through with more precision than ever. And then came the rally that made even the most casual observer stop scrolling completely. 25 shots, no breaks, pure rhythm and precision from both sides, baseline to baseline, margins tightening with every exchange, until Alex stepped inside the baseline, took the ball early, and ripped a sharp-angled winner across the clay that IGA couldn't reach. Clean. Decisive. Unreachable. The court went quiet for a half-second. Then IGA nodded. Just once. Subtle and understated in the way that genuine respect always is, the kind of acknowledgement that doesn't get offered out of politeness but only when something has genuinely earned it. That clip spread faster than almost anything else from Stuttgart. Millions of views replayed from every angle. Because people weren't watching a practice rally, they were watching growth made visible. Real, measurable, undeniable growth happening in real time in front of one of the best players on the planet. Coaches in the stands leaned forward. Analysts pointed quietly. The conversation that started was the kind that doesn't stop easily, because everyone was looking at the same thing and reading it the same way. This wasn't the same player from 6 months ago. Something had clicked. Something had leveled up in a way that the scoreboard alone couldn't fully capture. After her match victory, when most players disappear into the locker room to decompress, Alex came back out. Walked slowly onto the court, not to compete but to be present, to close the loop on something that deserved a proper ending. She reached the center of the Porsche Arena and stopped. Looked up. Saw it all. A sea of Philippine flags covering the stands, waving, waiting, patient in the way that only people who love something deeply can be patient. The crowd had been chanting for hours and showed absolutely no sign of stopping. And then, without any of it being planned or staged or organized, silence spread through the arena like a held breath. All of it at once. Every voice, every flag, every phone, waiting. Alex raised her arms. Took a breath. And instead of waving and walking away, she reached for a microphone and did something that turned an already extraordinary day into something that people in that building will probably describe to people for the rest of their lives. She started a call and response that shook the walls. The crowd didn't just respond, they detonated. Back and forth, her voice and theirs, building in layers until the sound inside the Porsche Arena stopped being sound and became something else entirely. Something physical. Something you could feel in your chest. Flags rising higher. Voices cracking with emotion. People shouting and crying at the same time without any embarrassment because that's what happens when something reaches you all the way down. For those few minutes, Stuttgart wasn't Stuttgart. It felt like Manila. It felt like home for thousands of people who had traveled extraordinary distances to feel exactly that. When asked about it afterward, Alex was quiet for a moment before answering, and what she said stripped every bit of noise away from the story. These people spent months saving money. They rearranged their entire lives. The least she could do, she said, was give them a moment they'd never forget. And that's the thing about Alex that the Stuttgart footage captures better than anything else could. She understands the exchange. She knows that what those fans give her goes so far beyond attendance or applause, and she meets that with everything she has, on the court and off it. From a practice session that literally stopped traffic to a tearful moment with a woman who waited 2 days just to be seen, from a jaw-dropping rally alongside one of the greatest clay court players alive to a celebration that turned a German arena into something that felt unmistakably Filipino, this wasn't a tournament. This was a takeover. And now the next test is already here. But after everything Stuttgart revealed, after all of it, nothing about what comes next feels predictable. Because this story stopped following any recognizable script a long time ago.